Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah shir. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We'll be learning today Mitzvah Hashem Daf Kuf Ches Amid Aleph. We are continuing to learn Hilchas Sukkah, and we pick up today on the bottom line of the Shulchan Aruch on Kuf Zayin Amid Beis Siman Tov Reish Mem in the midst of Sif Dalid. So we have been learning the halachas of mitztayer. We have said that a mitztayer is pater min hasukkah. That's the way the Mechaber picked up in the beginning of Sif Dalid. Mitztayer is pater min hasukkah, and like we quoted again yesterday, the Mishnah Berurah told us the reason is because the chiyuv of sukkah is teishvu kein taduru. You're supposed to live in the sukkah the way you live in your house. And if a person lives in a house and he's mitztayer, there's something about the house that makes it unfit, there's something that's causing tsar, he would leave the house. So if you're in the sukkah and you're mitztayer machmas ha-sukkah, you're mitztayer because of the sukkah, then it's not teishu kein taduru, and you can leave the sukkah. Now, the Ramah, we're continuing in the words of the Ramah over here. This is actually odd. One second, I'm a little confused as to where we left off. Yesterday, I think I made my line in the wrong place. I hope I'm right. We are picking up on Kuf Zayin Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom in the Ramah. I think I put the line in my Mishnah Berurah to mark where I finished the previous shir in the wrong place. If I'm repeating myself, so be it. We will chalk it up to Chazara. So, the Ramah says 2 lines from the bottom. We had learned previously that if it's Friday night and the Nerois go out in the sukkah, then you don't have to stay in the sukkah. You're considered mitztayer. That's a reasonable case of mitztayer. You have no nerois in the sukkah, and you are allowed to leave the sukkah. Yeah, you're allowed to leave the sukkah. So now the Rambam tells us, let's say you're in the sukkah, and you have neris in the sukkah, and you see it's becoming very breezy outside, and you're afraid that the neros are going to blow out, and you want to do something to prevent them from blowing out. Says the Rambam, mutar lifroi sadin oy beged min hatzad. You're allowed to take a towel, a sheet, some kind of a cloth, and spread it out alongside the neros to block the wind from blowing out the neros. There's no reason you can't block it from the side, because by blocking it from the side, you're not creating an oil. And therefore, that's not a problem. Aval, however, says the Ramah, loi tachas haschach. If the breeze is coming in from the top of the sukkah, and you want to spread out a sadin, you want to spread out a sheet underneath the schach, so that it's above the neris, underneath the schach, that the Ramah says is a problem. That you cannot do. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah is Katan Chavhei. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Avaloi tachas haschach. You can't spread out a sheet underneath the schach. Why? Well, explains the Chavetz Chaim, Da'oz yevatel hasadin es haschach v'yivsal hasukkah. If you spread out a sheet, which is puzzle for schach, the sheet is not kosher as schach. So if you spread out a sheet underneath the schach, what are you doing? You're being mevatel the schach that's on top of the sheet. And the Chavetz Chaim says that this is kidele'el b'simin taf reish chav tes sif yud tes. This follows what we learned earlier in Siman taf reish chav tes sif yud tes l'deya rishayna. According to the first opinion over there, the sasam sham hamechaber kavasei, and that's who the Mechaber gave as the default halacha. The Mechaber said that we should follow, the Mechaber, not that we should follow, he defaulted to say that the halacha is like that first opinion. And indeed, we learned in the Mishnah Berurah over there that we are machmir like the first opinion. So if you take a look in that Tzadik Amud Beis, in Siman Taf Reish Chav Tes Sif Yud Tes, that's where we had 2 opinions. Piris aleh sadin mipnei hachama. Let's say somebody spread a sheet over the sukkah for protection from the sun, or he spread out a sheet underneath the schach so that debris from the schach should not fall into the sukkah. So the first opinion said that that renders the sukkah puzzle. Why does it render the sukkah puzzle? Because according to the first opinion, if you spread out a sheet for some kind of protection. If it's protection from the elements, if it's protection from the rain, protection from the sun, protection from the wind, like in our case, blowing in through the schach. So what is the purpose of that sadin? That sadin was put up for shelter. What is schach? Schach is a roof that you put up l'shem tzeil. You put it up also for shelter. So if you take a pasal of sadin, you take a sadin which is pasal of schach, and you put it up for shelter. So according to the first opinion, that nullifies the schach that you're either putting the sadin over or under, because now you're being misachech with schach pasal in that area. So over here, the Ramah is telling you, according to the first opinion that we had over there in Tafresh Chavtes, if you spread out a sadin for protection from the wind that's coming in through the schach so that it should not blow out the neiros, that means you're being misachech with schach pasal. And that will nullify, it will be mavatal, the schach that's in that area. Now, depending on the size of the sheet, and depending on the size of the sukkah, that could actually cause the entire sukkah to be puzzled, depending on the scenario. Even if it doesn't cause the entire sukkah to be puzzled, if it's of a certain size, you can't sit under it because you would be sitting under schach puzzle. So therefore, the Ramah says you should not do this, because certainly according to the first opinion, over there in Tafresh Chavtes, this would be a problem. And the Mechaber over there, he says that there's a Yesh Oimrim that says not that way, but he says that l'chatchila we shouldn't do this. Continues the Chavetz Chaim over here, and he says, Omnam, however, Lefi Masha B'yarnu Sham, according to what we stated over there in the Mishnah Berurah, de b'mokem hatchak, that under pressing circumstances, kishe'enoi moyel prisa min atzad. Let's say you know that if you don't spread out a sheet underneath the schach to block the wind is going to blow out the neiros. If the wind blows out the neiros, you're going to be mitzvah and you're going to have to leave the sukkah. Somebody suggests to you, okay, you can't put a sheet on top, put a sheet on the side. But you know that's not where the wind is coming from. The wind is coming from the top. So you seem to have no choice but to block the wind from the top. If you don't block the wind from the top, you're going to end up being mitzvah and you're going to end up leaving the sukkah. So in that case, says the Chavetz Chaim, the mamakam et chak, if you're in a pressing circumstance, kishe'enoi moyel prisa min atzad, where spreading out a sheet on the side is not going to be effective, v'yitztarich lechol chutz l'sukkah, so that the neiros are going to end up blowing out and you're going to end up eating outside of the sukkah. In that case, says the Chavetz Chaim, yesh lismaich adeya shnia, then we could rely on the second opinion over there in Tafresh Chavtes, de materes litloi sadin kidei lahage. That the second sheet in Tafresh Chavtes, to give you just a quick synopsis, the two sheetas that we had over there, the first sheeta says, if you put up a sadin for shelter purposes, that means that you're putting up pasal schach to act as schach. So now you're putting up pasal schach either over or under the kosher schach. It nullifies the schach in that area, and you have a problem. You can't sit there. Or it could theoretically passel the entire sukkah. If you do it over the whole sukkah, it would passel the whole sukkah. If you did it over a large enough percentage of the sukkah, it could also passel the entire sukkah, especially depending on the size of the sukkah. That was the day of Rishona. The day of Shnia, however, said, if you're putting up this sadin for shelter purposes, then it's bottled to the schach. If you're putting it up to maintain the integrity of the schach, so for example, if you're putting up the sadin so that the schach shouldn't dry out, shrivel up, and become chamasa beruba mitzilasa, then the pasal of schach, the sadin, is what's maintaining the integrity of the kosher schach. That would create a problem. But if the kosher schach is fine, and you're just putting up the sadin to keep out the wind or to keep out the sun, then that day Shnia holds that that's okay. Over there in Tafresh Chavtes, we said that b'shas atchak we could rely on the day Shnia. Therefore, over here, the Mishnah Berurah also says, if you're in a mokem atchak, if you're under a pressing circumstance where the only way you could block the wind is by putting a sheet up on top, under the schach or over the schach, if you're stuck, you could rely on the day of Shnia, and we would say that it's okay. So ein lesser ze'akim kishiyachik asadin min aschach arba tvachim. However, even according to the day of Shnia, if you put a sheet over the neris underneath the schach, but it's more than 4 tfachim away from the schach, then even the day of Shnia holds that that's possible, because a sheet that's more than 4 tfachim removed from the schach cannot be bottled to the schach. And if it's not bottled to the schach, then it's an interposition between you and the schach, and that would be problematic. The Oz ein bottle asadin legabe schach. Continues the Chavetz Chaim and he says, Ubeshabbos v'Yom Tov, on Shabbos or on Yom Tov proper, as opposed to Chol HaMoed, you have a different problem, potential problem, with putting up a sheet over the neris. What is that? Ubeshabbos v'Yom Tov nachon li zaher. On Shabbos or on Yom Tov proper, it would be proper to take care. Shelo yachik shloisha tfachim chalal min aschach. If you have the neris and you want to put a sheet up on top of the neris beneath the schach, you should make sure not to leave a gap of 3 tfachim between the sheet and the schach. Why? Mishum chshash oihel. Because you might be creating an oil. In what sense are you creating an oil? Well, you have the schach is being mahil over a certain area. If you put in an interposition of a sheet, now it's being mahil over the sheet, and the sheet is in turn being mahil over what is beneath it. So depending on the exact circumstance, by erecting this sheet, you might be creating an oil. It's complex, and we would have to go back to Hilchos Shabbos and see the halachas of oil over there. And because it's dependent on the exact situation, maybe that's why the Chavetz Chaim writes, Nachon lizar shalayachik shlosh tfachim chalom and aschach mishum chshash oil. This is not a black and white thing. This depends on different variables. V'hu adin, the same halacha it would be, says the Chavetz Chaim, v'hu adin, the mutter b'mkam atchak lifrei sadin l'mayla al aschach kidei l'hagein. The same halacha applies in a makam atchak, in a pressing circumstance. You could put a sheet on top of the schach for protection, bein b'chayil, bein b'Shabbos v'Yom Tov, whether it's during the week on Chol HaMoed, or it's on Shabbos or Yom Tov proper. You want to put on a shlak. If it's a makam atchak, if you have to, you could put it on. And because again, according to the day of Shnia, you would be Yotze. And this is why we said back in Siman Taf Reish Chav Tes, for certain on the first night of Sukkot, when we know we have a bigger chiyuv to eat in the sukkah, if you go out to the sukkah on the first night of Sukkot and it's raining, eat a kizayis, make kiddush wash, eat a kizayis, or maybe even a kabeya in the rain, then close the shlak and eat in the sukkah. It's better to close the shlak and eat in the sukkah than it is to go inside the house. Again, because according to the day of Shnia in Daf Reish Chav Tes, you're yotze in the sukkah with the shlak on. Because the purpose of the shlak is for shelter, the purpose of the schach is for shelter, and according to the day of Shnia, the shlak would be bottled to the schach kosher, and according to Rabbeinu Tam, that's the day of Shnia, it's as if you're sitting in a kosher sukkah. However, the Mishnah Berurah says on Kuf Ches Amud Aleph, Mipnei Chash Haroyim, we have to be concerned about the people who will walk by your sukkah and they'll see that there's a sheet spread out on top of your sukkah. Sheyomru, they may say, Shemasachek Sukasei Besadin. Imagine if you have a sukkah that's thoroughly covered with a plastic sheet and you can't see any schach at all. Somebody might walk by and say, look at that puzzle of sukkah over there. Somebody covered his entire sukkah with a tarp. And he's using for schach, he's using a tarp. That's not a kosher sukkah. So, even though it's true that according to the day of Shnia, you could be yotze in the sukkah even if it's covered completely with a tarp, because of maris ayin, where people are going to say that you're using a tarp for schach, we should not be makel to allow you to put this sheet up on top over the schach where it will be visible to passerbys, unless it's obvious to everyone that the purpose of the sheet is for protection from the wind and it's not serving as the actual schach of the sukkah. If you do spread out a sheet to rely on the day of Shnia, you should not make a bracha of a leishev. Okay, now we go back to the Ramah on the bottom line of Kuf Zayin Amud Beis. This is where I had marked in my Mishnah Berurah that we were holding for today's shir. If I repeated myself, you will forgive me. Says the Ramah, Mi shalayuchal lishain b'sukkah machmas shetzar loy b'pishut yodav v'raglav. Let's say somebody has a problem. He has a very small sukkah. Now you want him to sleep in the sukkah, but he doesn't have enough room to go into the sukkah and lay down and fully stretch out. If he wants to sleep in the sukkah, he's going to have to sleep in a fetal position. And for him, that's mitzvah. He's very uncomfortable like that. Says the Ramah, very interesting. If you're unable to sleep in the sukkah, machmas shetzarloi, because it's too small for him, bepishut yadav v'raglov, it's too small to allow him to stretch out his arms and his legs. Says the Ramah, loy mikri mitzvah. That is not called mitzvah. That does not constitute mitzvah b'sukkah that makes you potter from sleeping in the sukkah. The chayav lishain sham, and he's obligated to sleep in the sukkah. Afal gav detzarich lichpaif yadav v'raglav, even though he's going to have to fold up his arms and his legs and sleep in a fetal position. Says the Mishnah Berurah is katan chavav. Loi mikri mitzvah. In this case, you are not called a mitzvah. Why not? Says the Mishnah Berurah, the derech ha'adam lipa'amim lishain kach kafuf. Because sometimes people do sleep that way. It's not a fact where you could say that people never sleep scrunched up and they don't sleep with their arms and legs folded. Not everybody sleeps fully stretched out. Certainly sometimes people do sleep like that. And therefore, that does not constitute mitzvah. Now, I did see over here, I think it was here in the Dirshu Mishnah Berurah. Let's go a little bit further. So first, the Chavetz Chaim brings down a very interesting raya why this is true. I think it's the Trumas Hadeshen. The Ramah brings this from the Trumas Hadeshen. I think this raya is brought by the Trumas Hadeshen, where he says like this, V'raya, I have a raya that this is true. That if the sukkah is small and you need to fold up your body, you need to tuck in your arms and legs, that does not constitute mitzvah. What's the raya? Very interesting raya. Mehad de kaimalon, from the fact that we paskin, sheshir sukkah, what's the minimum measurement of a sukkah? Shiva al shiva tvachim. 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim. How much is 7 tvachim? Approximately 28 inches? 25 inches, 28 inches, a drop over 2 feet. So a sukkah that's 2 feet square, 2 feet by 2 feet, is a kosher sukkah. Certainly you can't sleep in that sukkah without scrunching up. Certainly you cannot sleep in that sukkah without scrunching up. So obviously if it's a kosher sukkah, that means you could sleep there. So, and obviously that's not called mitzvah. Now there's an interesting Dirshu footnote over here. Dirshu footnote number 22 brings down from Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zatzal, Ubir Agoin Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zatzal, Sha'afim hu mitztar b'mitzius lishoin b'mokum tzar kozeh. Lamaisa, you'll tell me it's very nice. Some people sleep that way. I can't sleep that way. So you told me that I'm potter from sleeping in the sukkah if I'm mitztar because the lights are on and I can't sleep. So I'm mitzvah. So over here I'm mitzvah because I have to scrunch up like that and I can't sleep like that. So why is that any different? I'm mitzvah. So Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says a fascinating thing. He says, Mikol Mokoim, tsar ze noiveya, this tsar that you're suffering, because the sukkah is small and you can't stretch out in it, it's noiveya mikach sha'asukkah eina elodiras arai. The reason you're allowed to have such a small sukkah is because, again, let's remember, the Torah is mechayev you to only make a dira sarai. And sometimes when you make a dira sarai, you only make a very small dira. Since that's exactly what a sukkah is supposed to be, it's supposed to be a dira sarai. Sometimes when you live in a dira sarai, you have to live in a little bit of a cramped way. So ein b'kach ptur shel mitzvah. So what's interesting to me about this is I've mentioned already previously, and we've seen a couple of times, where this question comes in. How do we treat the fact that the Torah is only mechayev you to make a dira sarai? So for example, we said, If you're mitzvah because of the cold, you're allowed to leave the sukkah. Teshu came to Duru. You wouldn't live in your house if it was 30 degrees. You would leave your house. You'd find somewhere else to sleep. So if your sukkah is 30 degrees, you could leave the sukkah because you're mitzvah. It's not Teshu came to Duru. But then the question becomes, so why aren't you mechuyev to install heat in your sukkah? Teshu came to Duru. In your house you have heat, so maybe you should install heat in the sukkah to make sure that you could stay in the sukkah even when it's cold outside. And the answer that we saw was that because the Torah is not mechayev you to make your sukkah a diras kva. You don't make your sukkah the same way you make your house. Your house is sheetrock and studs on 16-inch centers and insulation and a heating unit. But your house is plywood and studs wherever you decided to throw them, and it's held together with pins and hinges. It's a diras harai. So the fact that the Torah tells you to go ahead and make a diras harai, that says you're not mechuyev to go heat your sukkah. Over here, we're seeing a little bit the other way. Over here, we're seeing chumrah. Over here, Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach is saying, you have to sleep in the sukkah because you're a little bit scrunched up. Well, the reason you're scrunched up, the reason you're scrunched up in the sukkah is because the sukkah is a diras harai, not a diras kva. And sometimes in a diras harai, you're going to be scrunched up. That's what happens in a diras harai. Okay. Continues the Mishnah Berurah over here. The first wide line in the Mishnah Berurah on Kov Ches Amud Aleph, near the end of the line, right by the Ois Kat and Lamed Tes for the Shar Hatzion. Bear with me one second as a repeat phone. I'm in the middle of saying shir. Is it an emergency? It's fine. Don't worry about it. My apologies on that. Okay, so right by the Ois Kat and Lamed Tes for the Shar Hatzion, Kov Ches Amud Aleph, first wide line in the Mishnah Berurah. Ulefi zeh, afilu im asa oisa lechatchila ba'ofen sheru'uya lishin sham b'pishut. Let's say you wanted to make sure that you're not going to be mitzvah when you sleep in the sukkah. So you made yourself a nice large sukkah, you made yourself a nice comfy place to sleep, where you definitely could stretch out fully without a problem. And then something happened, I don't know what, but something happened in the sukkah where now suddenly you're not going to be able to sleep the way you intended, and you're going to have to scrunch up. You're still chayiv to sleep there because that's not called mitzvah. The cost of a Sefer Nahar Shalom to become Makayim, and here we have a little bit of an out. Then the Sefer Nahar Shalom says to become Makayim, Mi shehu me'unug, somebody who's used to the finer things. The kimle begavei, and he knows about himself. Dilididei have a mitzvah lishan sham bekvifa. Rabbi Weiss, it's very nice you're telling me that some people sleep in the fetal position. I'm telling you right now, if you're going to be mechayev me to sleep 7 nights in the sukkah, on sukkahs, scrunched up like that, I'm not going to sleep a wink the entire sukkahs. So I'm telling you right now, I'm going to be mitzvah. It's very nice you're telling me some people sleep like that. You might sleep like that once in a while. I can't sleep like that. I'm going to be mitzvah. Says the Sefer Nahar Shalom in a chinami shepater milishain sham. So what the Sefer Nahar Shalom is telling you over here is that we do understand that to a certain extent, when it comes to the ptur of mitzvah, we have to go each person kifi what he's used to, kifi madrigasai, and kifi acholtai, and kifi what he's used to having. So if a person is very ma'unig, and he can't sleep that way. So then in Chinami, the Sefer Nahar Shalom says, for him, that would constitute mitzvah, and he would have a ptur, and he wouldn't have to sleep in the sukkah. I dare say that nowadays, our level of ma'unig, maybe unfortunately, maybe Baruch Hashem, the Baruch Hashem has given us a lot of bracha, I think we probably are ma'unig. And there are certain things that would make us mitzvah, that the Chavetz Chaim would look at us like we were out of our minds. That constitutes mitzvah, you're too pampered. But the problem is, we are too pampered, so that is mitzvah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nהיה b'dvarim. Now the Chavetz Chaim ends off Ois Kat and Chavav here, and he says, now wait a second. If I'm telling you that there is a ptur of mitzvah, if the sukkah is small, and you're not going to be able to sleep in the sukkah because you're too cramped, Well, then that goes back into our whole conversation yesterday in the Ramah. Do we now say that this sukkah is not roy for sleeping in, which means it's not roy to be used for one of the primary functions of dira, and Teshu Kein Taduru, your sukkah has to be roy for achila, for shtia, for shina. Your sukkah has to be roy for all of these things. Are we now saying that you created a sukkah that's not roy for all of these things, and therefore your sukkah is not even usable for achila? Remember, the Ramah said yesterday, if you make a sukkah that's not roy l'shina because you're going to be mitzvah, then you can't be yotze even for achila. So maybe now over here, if you have a very small sukkah that's too cramped, and you're going to say, you're going to pull a mitzvah, you're going to say, I can't sleep in the sukkah because of mitzvah. Now you can't use it for achila either. Says the Chavetz Chaim, no. V'afal pi kein yotze yidei chavase ba'achila, kevet shebe'es asiya, ha'yaroy l'didei lecha v'lishen sham. This person, when he made a sukkah that was roy. It became not roy afterwards. He suggests that for that, it doesn't make that now it's not roy for achila either. Okay. Says the Ramah weiter. Last word on the top line of Kuf Ches Amud Aleph. More on the P'tur of Mitzvah. V'lo yuchal adam loymar mitzvah ani. A person cannot say that he's mitzvah and therefore potter from sukkah. Ella b'davar shederech b'nei adam lehitztar by. It has to be something that makes sense. It has to be something that people are mitzvah from that kind of thing. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Cotton Chaf Ches Ela B'davar the Ilavachi. If you're going to say mitzvah, the sukkah, the walls are painted green, I can't take that shade of green. It just, I don't know, it makes me nauseous. I can't take it. That's not normal. Says the Mishnah Berurah Cotton Chaf Ches the Ilavachi Avshahu mitzvah. Even though you might not be lying, you might be mitzvah. Amrinon Batla Daitai Eitzel Kal Adam. That's not a normal mitzvah, batla daitoi eitzel kol adam, and that does not give you a p'tur. It has to be something that most people would agree that it constitutes a tsar. However, the Chavetz Chaim does throw out over here, again, from the Taz, he throws out a little bit of an out. He says, unless shehu me'anin adas, if you really are an extremely delicate person, and delicate people are mitzvah from this kind of thing. Look, I know, let's say me, I happen to be very sensitive to smells. So bad smells, I can't take it. So there are times that I say I have to leave. I can't take the smell. Other people are fine. They're fine with it. But I've met other people who also, yes, they're very sensitive to smells. So if people that are very sensitive to smells would be very sensitized to that kind of smell, and it would be mitzvah, then I could leave the sukkah. But if it's what? There are no people that are sensitive to that degree, then it already becomes batla daitai eitzel kol adam. Weiter in the Rabbah, ve'eina mitzvah potter ela im yinatzal atzmai min atzar. And certainly this whole p'tur of mitzvah is only germane if by leaving the sukkah you're going to escape the tsar, meaning that the sukkah is what's causing the tsar. Being in the sukkah is what's causing the tsar. So now you have a p'tur of mitzvah and you can leave the sukkah, and by leaving the sukkah you're going to escape that condition of mitzvah. But if leaving the sukkah is not going to alleviate the tsar, then there's no p'tur. If you're not going to escape the tsar by leaving the sukkah, then you have to stay in the sukkah. Says the Mishnah Berurah Cotton Lamed. The whole root of the p'tur of mitzvah is teishvu ke'ein taduru. And by your house, if you're mitzvah because of the house, and by leaving the house you could escape the tsar, you would leave. So A person will leave his house if it's extremely cold in his house, if he could go to a warmer house. But a person's not going to leave his house if it's 30 degrees inside and it's 30 degrees outside. A guy's not going to say, I can't take it, it's too cold in the house, I'm leaving the house. And then he goes outside and it's 30 degrees outside. So he's not going to leave the house. So there's no Torah to leave the sukkah if leaving the sukkah is not going to improve anything. V'hachinami b'sukkah. Okay, now we go to Sif Hey. Says the Mechaber, Avel chayev b'sukkah. A mourning, somebody who's an avelus, somebody who lost one of the 7 relatives that you're mechuyev to keep shiva for, an avel, he's chayev b'sukkah, even though he's mitzvah, he's depressed, he's in a bad mood. But that doesn't exempt him from sukkah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, is cotton lamed aleph, avel chayev b'sukkah. Now this gets very, very interesting over here. You see, I'm sure when you first see the words of the Mechaber, and you see that an avel is chayev in sukkah, so you say to yourself, well, what p'tur would he have? Mitzvah? Well, we just said that mitzvah is only a p'tur if leaving the sukkah is going to help you, right? But if the tsar comes from the sukkah, over here you're not mitzvah because of the sukkah, you're mitzvah because you lost a loved one. That doesn't change when you leave the sukkah. So why would we have a havamina that mitzvah is pater min sukkah? Well, let's take a look at the background that the Mishnah Berurah gives us over here. Ois katan lamed aleph, avel chayev b'sukkah. So first the Chavetz Chaim starts off and he says, Da'afal gav de mitzvah pater min sukkah. Even though mitzvah is pater min sukkah, so okay, and avel is pitzar, maybe he's pater min sukkah. So first says the Chavetz Chaim, Hani mili tzara de memela habaloi machbas hasukkah. When is this true that a mitzvah is pater min sukkah? That's when he's suffering a tsar that's being caused by the sukkah. If it's a tsar that's being caused by the sukkah, so then like we said, if he leaves the sukkah, the tsar goes away, mitzvah is pater min sukkah. Aval hacha, but over here, iu de kamitzar nafshe. The aval, the sukkah is not causing him tsar, he's causing himself tsar. And now here's where it gets tricky. Iboyale liasuve daite. This person needs to be able to get a grip on his emotions. He needs to be able to calm himself down, kedei lekayim es ha-mitzvah, so that he should be able to be mekayim the mitzvah of sukkah. Now, if you take a look in the Sharat Tzion, Ois Katan Mem Daled, he brings this straight out of the Gemara in Sukkah on Chaf Hey Amud Beis. Now, let's analyze what we just said over here. We said what on face value seemed to be a very easily understandable halacha. An avel is chayiv in sukkah, even though he's mitzvah. That seems to be very, very simple to understand. The tsar of the avelus has nothing to do with the sukkah. So of course you're chayiv in sukkah. You're only pater from sukkah from mitzvah if the tsar is coming from this fact that you're in the sukkah. So this seems to be very open and shut. Yes, avel chayiv b'sukkah. This should be a very short Mishnah Berurah. All the Mishnah Berurah should say is that this is not a tsar that's coming from the sukkah, and therefore there's no p'tur of mitzvah. But that's not what the Mishnah Berurah says. What the Mishnah Berurah says is, he does say what we just said, Hani mili tsar de memela habole machmas sukkah. The only p'tur of mitzvah is when it comes from the sukkah. But what does he say after that? After that he says, aval hacha iu de kamitzar nafshe. This person is causing himself his own tsar. He's all emotional, he's all worked up, maybe he's depressed. He's causing his own tsar. The sukkah is not causing the tsar. Now, if we would stop over here, the Mishnah Berurah still would be okay. But no, he goes weiter. He needs to calm himself down kidei lekayim es ha-mitzvah, so that he'll be able to be mekayim the mitzvah. What do you mean? What do I care if he calms himself down or he doesn't calm himself down? I mean, yeah, I want him to calm himself down. But what does that have to do with sukkah? There's no p'tur of mitzvah, because the sukkah is not causing the tzar. So you're chayiv in sukkah. You're emotional, you're upset, cry me a river. I'm very sorry that you're all upset. But you're still chayiv in sukkah. What do you mean? He needs to calm himself down. Kidei lekayim es ha-mitzvah. It sounds like if he doesn't calm himself down, he's not mekayim the mitzvah. Why not? He's sitting in a kosher sukkah. He has no p'tur of mitzvah. Why isn't he mekayim the mitzvah? So, what you have to say over here, and there are Mefarshim who say this, what you have to say over here is like this. Really, there is a mitzvah that might be able to pater an oval from sukkah. And what that is when a person is in avelus, what does he want to do? I want to climb into bed. What is a depressed person? Oh, he doesn't get out of bed all day. He's so depressed, he doesn't get out of bed all day. He goes into his room and he shuts the door. A depressed person, a person who's wallowing in his grief, likes to go into a dark, closed room, crawl into his bed. He doesn't want to be around anybody. I don't eat in the sukkah. I want to climb into my bed in my bedroom. That's where I want to be. So really, there is a certain mitzvah. I don't want to go out to the sukkah. I don't want to be sitting in the sukkah now. Sitting in the sukkah is very uncomfortable for me now. I'm in a terrible mood. I'm in mourning. I'm depressed. I don't want to be sitting in the sukkah now. So sitting in the sukkah is giving me tsar. There is a tsar that's neveya, that flows from the sukkah. And I could alleviate that tsar by leaving the sukkah and going and climbing into my room in my bed. Says the Mechaber, no. Aval chayiv b'sukkah. You know why? Because of what the Gemara says on Chafei Beis. Ibaya leil yasuve daite. You need to get a grip. You need to calm yourself down. You need to take it easy. There's a time for grief. There's a time for not. You need, right now, you need to get a grip on yourself. And you need to be able at least to come into the sukkah and eat a suda in the sukkah and be mekayim your mitzvah of sukkah and not be betzar in the sukkah. Because it's not a condition that can't be remedied. It's not pshat that it's raining. It's not pshat that it's freezing outside. It's not that's not pshat that it's 105 degrees outside, so there's a Torah of mitzvah. It's pshat that you're in a bad mood. And because you're in a bad mood, you're suffering from eating in the sukkah. You got to get a grip. The Torah der Munz, that you got to get your grief under control, and you got to be able to be mekayim the mitzvah of sukkah. Kasa b'Sefer Tanya, the Mishnah Berurah continues, quotes from the Sefer Tanya, Im ameis hayechaviv kol kach. If the loved one that he lost was so beloved to him, she'eini yachal hasira milibai, that he pashut can't get the grief out of his heart, then in chinami potter. Umayri shebitztar b'shiviyasa b'sukkah. But like the Magen Avraham says, when is he potter? He's potter if he has a tsar from sitting in the sukkah. Vayin b'Sefer Yeshuas Yaakov, however, says the Chavetz Chaim, take a look at the Sefer Yeshuas Yaakov, shechilik bazal Tanya, he disagrees with the Baal Tanya. But Prima Godim is stapek, and we have an interesting Prima Godim. But Prima Godim is stapek, the Prima Godim wonders, le'inyan oinen b'chalamayid, when it comes to the halacha of an oinen on chalamayid. An oinen is somebody who lost one of the 7 loved ones, one of the 7 relatives that he's mechuyev to hold shiva for. So the period of time between the petira and the kvura, that person is called an oinen. An oinen is pater min ha-mitzvahs. He's exempt from fulfilling mitzvahs because he's supposed to be focused on the tzarchei hames. He has to be completely focused on taking care of the needs of the nifter. So the Pri Begadim wonders, what happens if somebody chas v'chalila is an oinen on chalamayid? Or even if somebody is an oinen on Yom Tov proper. How are you an oinen on Yom Tov if there's no kvura on Yom Tov? So there are times that there is kvura on Yom Tov. We learned that on the first day Yom Tov, you can have non-Jews do the kvura. Or if Yidden are going to be oisik in the kvura on the second day of Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz, in those cases, you have the halacha of an oinen, even on Chalamayid, even on Yom Tov. So the Pri Begadim wonders, if somebody is an oinen on Chalamayid or on Yom Tov proper, im chayiv b'sukkah. Is he chayiv in the sukkah? Now, normally we say that an oinen is pater min ha-mitzvahs. What does that mean? He's pater for being mekayim a mitzvah, and he could be sheva al taisa. I don't have to get up and put on tefillin. I could sit back and not put on tefillin. Why? Because he's an oinen. So the oinen is not mechuyev to get up, bekum va'aseh. He's not mechuyev to get up and be mekayim a mitzvah. But over here, the question is, by sukkah, it's very nice to say that you're not mechuyev to go eat in the sukkah. But are you allowed to eat outside of the sukkah? By eating outside of the sukkah, you're being mavatal l'chiyav aseh biyadayim. Bekum v'aseh, you're getting up and you're being over, you're eating outside of the sukkah. So that's why the Pri Megadim wonders, what's the halacha of the einain in the context of sukkah? The Sefer B'Kur Yaakov mitzadei chu pater. The Sefer B'Kur Yaakov, he leans to say that the einain is pater. Ayin sham, see further over there. Okay, we can go a little bit weiter. Sivav, bottom line in the Mechaber. Chasan v'shushbinov v'chol b'nei hachuppah. A groom, a chasan who just got married. V'shushbinov, his groomsmen, I guess you would call them. His close chaverim. V'chol b'nei hachuppah. All of the people who come to be misameach chasan v'kala. Peturim min ha-sukkah. They're exempt from the chiyuv of sukkah. Kol shivas yemei ha-mishta, for the duration of Sheva Brachas. So says the Mechaber. What's at work over here? Says the Mishnah Berurah back on Kuf Ches Amud Aleph, Eis Katan Lamed Beis. Chasan. Why is the chasan pater from sukkah? De'ein simcha ela b'chuppah. Now, what exactly is a chuppah in the parlance of the Mishnah and the Gemara? We call a chuppah, you go to Beis Fega, you go to any one of the chasana halls, the chasana and kala walk down the aisle, and they go under the chuppah canopy, and that's where the ceremony of the chasana takes place. Kiddushin is made under the chuppah. According to some shittas, nisuin is accomplished. The second stage of marriage is accomplished under the chuppah. The chuppah, that's why you'll see the caterer go over to the chuppah or the Masad Kiddushin, go over to the chuppah, to the chasan, and see to it that the chasan acquires the ownership or the rights to the area under the chuppah. And by the kala coming to him under the chuppah, the kala is coming into the domain of the chasan, and that could accomplish nisuin. And that's what we colloquially refer to as chuppah. But that's not the chuppah that we're speaking about over here, again in the parlance of the Mishnah and the Gemara. The chuppah was some type of a gazebo that was erected for the use of the chasan and the kala for the Shivas Yemei HaMishta. During the Sheva Brachas, the chasan and the kala spent their time in the chuppah, in this gazebo. And this is where they ate their sudas, and this is where everybody came to be misameach chasan v'kala. Why is the chasan pater from sukkah during Shivas Yemei HaMishta? Says the Mishnah Berurah here, nice cut in Lamed Beis, de'ein simcha ela b'chuppah, because the true simcha of Shivas Yemei HaMishta takes place in that chuppah. The chuppah nikra mokem amuchan liyeshivas chasan v'kala. That's that gazebo that was erected for the mokem yeshivas chasan v'kala. That's where the chasan and kala spend their time and eat their sudas during the Shivas Yemei HaMishta. Ve'ein yichaylen lechel b'sukkah v'l'smayach b'chuppah. Now you'll tell me, okay, so now I understand why the chasan is pater. The chasan is pater because he can't leave the chuppah, because the inyan of simchas chasan and kala is such a tremendous inyan, and the chasan can't leave the chuppah. If he leaves the chuppah, he'll be mitzvah. So he can't go now, leave the chuppah, and go to the sukkah to eat. He's got to be in the chuppah. That's where he has to eat. But how about the people who are coming to be misameachim? They don't have to stay in the chuppah the whole time. Let them go to the sukkah, eat their suda in the sukkah, and then come to the chuppah and be misameach chasan v'kala. Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. Ve'ein yichaylen lechel b'sukkah v'l'smayach b'chuppah. We can't have people eating the suda in the sukkah and then coming to be misameach in the chuppah. De'ein simcha ela b'makom suda. Because what makes the simchas chasan v'kala? There's got to be food, right? When we party, we have food. There's got to be potato kugel, and there's got to be cholent, and there's got to be at least herring. There's got to be. So you have to have makom suda. Now you're going to say make the suda in the sukkah and then come to the chuppah. You destroyed the simcha. There's no simcha anymore. And like they say, so why don't we just do the whole thing in the sukkah? Let the chuppah be in the sukkah. Can't do that because let's remember again, a sukkah is a diras arai. We cannot expect people to make a sukkah big enough to accommodate the simcha of the chasan v'kala. Umayri, the Chavetz Chaim says, what case are we talking about here? Shenasa Erev Haregel Koidim. We must be discussing a case where the chasana took place either Erev Yom Tov or before Erev Yom Tov, and now we're talking about Sheva Brachas on Yom Tov. Why? They noisim nashim amayid, because we learned earlier that you don't make a chasana during Yom Tov or during Chalamoid. Kedelael besimin taf kuf mem vav. Ais kan lam and gimel peturim min asukah. All of these people are patur from sukkah. However, v'yesh b'chayvin oisam. There are those like the Rosh who say that no, the Chassan and all his guests are takachayv in sukkah. Disfira lahu, because these paiskim hold the efshel lechel b'sukkah v'lismayach b'chuppah. You'll make the suda in the sukkah and you'll be misamech in the chuppah. That's okay. V'alkein eskimu achrayim, and therefore the achrayim reach a consensus and they agree. The royal lechassan lahachmer al atzmai v'leisha b'sukkah v'loy levarech. The chassan should be machmir and he should eat his sudas in the sukkah, albeit without making a leishiv. V'cheina sheshpinin, and also the guests, when they eat together with the chassan, and they make sheva brachas in the sukkah, they are not required to make a leishev. But if they're eating on their own, in their own sukkah, they must eat in the sukkah and they must make a leishev. Okay, we're going to stop over here with the words of the Ramah on top of Kuches on the base. Thank you so much for joining me for Libet HaTorah. The schus of Libet HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rabban Shalom should send Yeshua's Refuas, Parnas, and Shidduchim to all those in need. And we should be zeicher to see B'yas Gal Tzedek B'meher V'yameinu. I am recording this the night before Erev Yom Kippur. Everyone should have a Gemach Sima Tova, a good Geben Shtiar. We should be zeicher to Slicha, Mechila, Kapara. The Rabban Shalom should have Rachmanis on Gans Klal Yisrael. The Rabban Shalom should have Rachmanis on us. He should take us out. We should be zeicher to see the B'yas Gal Tzedek with the Binyan Beis Hamikdash. B'meher V'yameinu. Amen. Be well.